Episode 8 in the series revolves around the fortune teller Shitoto, who begins to go on a spree of accurately predicting the deaths of a series of people. Of them, several of Lupin's previous thievery marks and victims, which puts a spotlight on him as a potential suspect in their deaths. Jigen is hired to destroy the man's lithograph, the means by which he tells his fortunes, as the dying request of Shitoto's newest victim. However, as Jigen confronts Shitoto, he finds his lithograph has already been torched to destruction, leaving both at the mercy of Oscar and Zanagata, who are investigating the deaths themselves. The police are sabotaged by Lupin, however, who frees Jigen on a whim, as there's something else going on here. Why did Shitoto target all of Lupin's former marks? Well, it would be at the behest of an owl-headed man, the same one Fujiko has been seeing in her nightmares all series. As Lupin's picked up on Fujiko being involved, it's why he's held continued interest in this, figuring out Shitoto's fabricating the dates to coincide with the planned day for them to die, making the deaths happen like clockwork. And figuring this all out was in fact a planned test by the Owl Man for Lupin, to see if he was truly worthy of Fujiko's time. Though Shitoto's lithograph, while it was destroyed, Shitoto commissioned Fujiko to steal a copy so he wouldn't entirely go out of work, but nonetheless free himself from the chains of the Owl Man by leading Fujiko and Lupin straight into a police ambush. Jigen's got them covered, though, with a sniper rifle, destroying the recordings of his lithograph and allowing them all to escape. But in the moment after, in the flashes of lightning, Shitoto reveals the name of his client.
I shall reveal the future to you and thus fulfill my final contract with Count Luis U. Almeida!
The man Fujiko has been running from her entire life.
What are you doing?
Like a programmed doll, executing orders on command. Complementing and contrasting that disturbing imagery, this is then immediately followed by Lupin and Jigen working together to steal from an artist his most prized work, a living woman who he had used throughout her life as a living piece of art, from birth through maturity as a woman, viewing her as less than sentient, just a canvas to mutilate and tattoo and put on display as an object, not a thinking being, nor allowed any type of education beyond that.
The creator would have treated her like any other painting. And why would anyone waste time trying to teach a painting how to speak?
Turning her entire life into some sort of grotesque exhibit.
This attempt to free her, surprisingly, draws them into conflict with Fujiko, who is also trying to spirit her away, though with more lethal intentions. Fujiko discovered this woman's existence and was so disgusted by the idea of living like that it triggered some memories from amidst this court of owls connected to Imelda, leaving her nothing but disgusted, consumed with such overwhelming disgust that she had to kill her, end the life of someone abused through life, if only to end their misery. Thus she attacks them like a woman possessed, not caring what's in her way. But neither Lupin nor Jigen see it like that, their liberation of the woman being one of their good deeds despite their thievery, in trying to free her so she'd have a chance at life.
Happiness doesn't come easy with so much baggage to carry around, but try anyway. Just do your best, okay?
The chase leads to the center of a hot spring network, at which clouds of natural gas concentrate, leaving them without access to firearms lest they all die, which allows Lupin the chance to confront Fujiko over why she wants the girl dead, and she sees them as just too similar. They're too huge a reminder of the past she hides, the past she wishes to suppress and forget, which has haunted her.
By strangers. When you eat, even when you breathe, everything you do is a part of somebody else's plan. And pathetic. You see yourself when you look at her, and you can't take it. Isn't that right?
So obviously going into the series the first time, you're going to end up asking yourself, how did he figure that out? Yeah, Lupin has mad intuition, but she's not really giving him the prompts from their meetings to read her like that. Without knowing anything else, you wonder if he looked into things about her after the encounter with Shitoto, or something he was on to before the series started, since he knew of her intent to steal her away.
While it is later answered, I felt like I turned over 2 pages at once in this specific scene.
Though the first episode's declaration and this one do work as connecting fibers, as he announced his intent to steal away and thus free both of these women from those that held them captive. But I feel there's a missing connection between these 2 points in the episodes between them. And hey, that's not uncommon for Lupin stories. Even the mostly serialized story of Part 4 didn't have the overarching story have tangible connective tissue beyond the setting and new characters that got involved. But for a haunted past plot? Sorry, filling in the gaps in the aftermath doesn't always work if you've not been working to properly seed the storyline throughout. While we have been seeing the cutaways to the Court of Owls, their meaning and influence is rather intangible besides causing Fujiko to momentarily pause and act at odd times which are perpendicular to the running plots, thus act more as peculiarities in everything instead of proper foreshadowing. Cut those scenes and they have no seeming tangible influence, which is not how such should be executed as they still don't matter once you know what their meaning is. And yet, despite that, those memories and their influence have her running scared constantly in this series. Regardless, Fujiko gives up her attempts at killing the woman, Lupin and Jigen turning her over to a secluded Buddhist monastery, where hopefully she'll be able to find some semblance of peace. Peace that eludes Fujiko herself. But as the series begins to arc towards its conclusion, the influence of the Owl Men begins to come more into play.
Good. It took them 10 episodes out of a 13-episode series to have that happen. Yeah, I know, you needed to get first meetings out of the way and build their dynamics firmly first, but a plot like this, teasing their influence is not enough.
As Lupin is contacted by the Owl Men directly, them desiring him to follow through on his notice of intention to steal Fujiko, only for him to do it for them instead of himself. Almeida's story is also expanded upon as well, Zenigata having gotten the name from the Shitoto case, the man being the head of a pharmaceutical company.
Because, of course, it would be an evil pharmaceutical executive. It's practically an oxymoron at this point.
And has been in contact with Lupin before, it being revealed that they were the ones who originally contacted Lupin about the cult that kicked the series off. Him having been contracted not to steal the hallucinogenic crystals per se, but Fujiko herself. The cult was merely a front for them to get what they really wanted. Human experiments, with Fujiko's own actions there being a means to free herself from these owls by exposing their influence, as the drug the cult was using is a derivative of a mind control serum that Almeida used on her.
It's all about fear. Using fear to control people. Breeding mistrust and capitalizing on the conflict that follows.
Unfortunately, Lupin ends up dosed by their hallucinogenic dust, but in the event that happened, he'd already tipped off Zenigata to what was going on, alluding back as well to the previous cultist to him to give him the clues he needs to continue where he left off, as Zenigata had also put that case in the back burner in their usual style of antagonistic camaraderie.
And as something of a tangent related to this, something people who try to redo the Lupin-Zenigata dynamic for themselves in a cops and robbers story always get wrong, and by the way is a significant reason why that specific series did so badly, because they never even pretended to try and do it right, as they just made it a caustic popularity contest between the two factions, is how their relationship actually is supposed to work.
Yes, it is a goofy and arrogant thief being chased by a bumbling police detective, but what's gotten so consistently wrong by others is their beef is not personal, it is solely professional. The two, first and foremost, respect one another. Zenigata considers Lupin such a serious threat to the world's valuables because he respects his cunning, intelligence, and relative morality in him not swindling the poor. And Lupin in turn respects Zenigata's tenacity and dedication for bringing criminals to justice. And what they also get wrong is how that dynamic works when there is a bigger fish to fry between them. Lupin isn't out to physically or emotionally harm people. He isn't out for conquests, world domination, to inconvenience the innocent or the destitute. He isn't malicious, he's a trickster. And there's no fun in domination or subjugation, especially in a world which you already think is all his to begin with. So, of course, he'd help bring to justice worse criminals than himself that are out to harm people. Because he's an actual gentleman. Thief the same as his grandfather. That is, after all, what it means to be a gentleman thief and use the name of Lupin. If you screw that up, which several other series that have tried to do the Lupin thief stuff have done, you entirely fail the premise that originates from the original French novels. And Zenigata is the same from the other side of this. He'd let even his biggest targets slide, as he has many times before, and works with Lupin on many other occasions to help take down someone who does and will harm others in their own greed. He is professional enough to understand an ally of convenience and wouldn't split his attention in such circumstances. The second he acknowledges someone else as a more immediate threat to people's lives and safety, he'd team up even with a world-renowned thief in a second as long as their aim was the same, as he understands how to prioritize and read a situation to know who to go after first.
What that show got wrong is no one had an idea of what anyone's priorities were, or who was a relevant significant target to focus their time on. Or if they did, they refused to understand or acknowledge how to act like they knew when it mattered. So the antagonism that should have never been present between them in a crisis never died. And it was always a personal beef influenced the conflict, not a professional one, so it would override situations where the teams should have been teaming up. I mean, when you have an arrogant meathead of a cop spend more time attacking, antagonizing, and openly and outwardly hating someone who only calls themselves a thief but breaks no actual laws to warrant being arrested as they're actually acting as a contracted stolen good recovery agent, then they spend time focused on fighting monsters who are causing widespread destruction, hates them more because they are more popular than him and not because of the actions they perform, and then have the show find the only way to make the cop look good is to repeatedly assassinate the characters of the thief cast members and make them betray the entire premise of the gentleman thief in doing so, you have got your priorities majorly screwed up. Yeah, I felt I had to address that at least once in these vids. I didn't talk about any Lupin content while that stupid series was running, to give an object example back then of how badly it screwed up its character dynamics and never actually fixed them. Gentleman thief, alternatively in conflict and working aside a no-nonsense cop who both have their priorities straight. It should not have been a hard concept for them to entirely screw it up like they did.
Hell, the way Zenigata has used Fujiko in this series,
not like that,
also showcases that with another character thrown into that mix, as cutting a deal with someone with a particular means of action in order to make use of their skills for the greater good, as the way they operate always leaves a next time for capture with no danger to people's lives or well-being through doing so. That is 100% consistent with Zenigata's character and that of his entire archetype, as he has his priorities straight from the start without arrogance, without corruption, without pride blinding him, and with a true sense of purpose.
And what Zenigata is doing now is a showcasing of that, as he and Lupin are working the same case from opposite angles to now bring Almeida down after uncovering what is truly going on with the man, step by step uncovering the truth that has been hidden. After all, isn't it the job of both a gentleman thief and a detective to bring that which has been buried in darkness back into the light? Cops working with thieves towards the same goal is a great dynamic addressed in numerous series, and it's sad that so many others don't know anything but how to screw it up.
Both groups find that what they're after is in a ghost town, formerly the headquarters of Amida's pharmaceutical company, but whose experiments eventually led to the populace being driven insane 13 years before this due to a chemical spill. The most prominent drug being the one the cult used, initial exposure causing intense euphoria, with higher doses leading to aggression and consistent hallucinations of people appearing as owls.
During a dose, the subject's mental state deteriorated quickly and permanently. The subject kept screaming, Fräulein Euler.
Fräulein?
Slates as Miss Owl.
Who is telling Lupin all of this, you might ask? Well, it's a father of one of the victims of the experiments, one of the scientists responsible for the drug's creation. In the incident with the spill, his daughter ended up becoming the Institute's premier test subject, her fearful hallucinated memories of owls and men all being caused by the drug warping her perception of the experiments performed on her, as the organization sought to conquer the fear impulse in humanity entirely.
Not understanding that fear is kind of an important response in humans as it prevents us from reckless actions that might have far bigger consequences than they're capable of dealing with. No fear of consequences? Why not set off a gigantic bomb in an enemy nation or assassinate an official? I mean, you can, right? But no, the fear of what would happen, the fear of reprisal in kind, keeps you from doing stupid crap like that. It keeps us self-conscious of ourselves and our actions and how they impact others and ourselves. To ignore these things, it just leaves you an impulsive, short-sighted sociopath unable to grow or develop or gain tangible fulfillment. Yeah, every emotion we feel is actually really damn important, as they all tell us something. Ignoring them when we shouldn't is really stupid, but knowing when to push them aside to do something important is, well, something we all need to do eventually in our lives. You can still feel fear by jumping into a burning building to help someone, but pushing it aside shows yourself a better person because you have full understanding of what you are doing. A reckless or fearless person doing the same doesn't warrant that same praise, because as they don't think, as they act, they can just put more people at risk needlessly.
You knew all this from the beginning? But why didn't you ever—
Why didn't I ever tell you? Who do you think you are? Really? Do I work for you now?
No, sir. I didn't mean—
Fujiko herself is evidence of their crimes. Its effects have been carved into her blood and body, and why she was unaffected by the dust the cultists used before. Her liaisons with Zenigata being her using him to hush out their actions as well, which Zenigata himself picked up on. And now he knows that Lupin is after the truth of all this as well. But as they both end up hallucinating due to the volume of the drug just spread all over the facility, they're at a disadvantage as they're just chased down through the compound. Though ultimately, they learn the doctor regrets the actions he made, in giving his daughter up to their experiments, hoping that Lupin can save her from both Imelda and herself.
Twilight, perfect for the end.
Station. Do not forget, the moment you grasp the butterfly, it takes flight, and everything perishes.
I know you're dead, Doctor. You're not real.
Unfortunately, because Zenigata gathered his own evidence of all this from an illegal entry and seizure, it's inadmissible to the court system for them to even try to prosecute Imelda. Thus, where the normal Lupin plot would begin in him teaming with Lupin to take this guy down. Unfortunately, well, you saw what Oscar's view in all this is by him wanting to show his worth to his man-crush.
And with him viewing Fujiko as nothing more than a means of biological waste disposal, his words, paraphrased, not mine, you can kind of see what happens next.
As the break in the story before the final act is, well, giving context to Oscar, the character who is out of place in all this as Zenigata's sidekick. As is revealed, they met when Zenigata saved his life from a bunch of boys who assaulted him back when Zenigata was a beat cop, leading Oscar to join the police force himself when he was old enough, and following him like a puppy ever since. But with this latest break in the drug case and Zenigata's chewing out of him during it, well, Oscar snaps, proceeding to frame Fujiko for a series of perfect crimes and thefts, producing evidence of her being there which he'd gathered from previous encounters with her to leave at these crime scenes, and doing everything he can to slander her name, all to build up to when Oscar himself, Oscar, the great protege of the great detective Zenigata, will bring her in, all to be lavished in the praise and adoration of his mentor. Praise him! Praise him!
But it's immediately obvious to everyone, including Zenigata, that this isn't really Fujiko, as Fujiko doesn't get off on the bombastic distraction gambit luring away people's attention from their prize. No, Fujiko sneaks in, waits for the opportune moment to hit her mark, and then sneaks out under some form of cover. Her flaw is always that she's there, in the background, in person, with no one the wiser until it's clear that you've been fooled, and she makes that clear in your face for you. It is her consistent MO. Thus why she gets into more trouble with her antics than Lupin does when things go sideways, as she has a tendency to underestimate her opposition or not see the full depths of resources tacked against her, which she then has to weasel her way out of as she inevitably expects that to happen. To leave an advance notice calling card immediately tells you it's a frame job, and her lack of appearances only furthers that perception. And any competent profiler, fellow thief, or detective should be able to tell that.
And where's Fujiko during each of these incidents? Why, off with Goemon, who has looked after her in the months since she tried to kill the living Art Woman, just broken by the experience and taking time to piece herself back together, and being bitchy towards Goemon throughout.
The early interactions of the series tried to imply there could be a thing between them due to the mutual bonding over them lacking a real place in the world, and really, this shows why nothing in any of the media this is setting itself before would have anything of that sort happen. Goemon got to know her, and had him realize that she wasn't his type despite their similarities. Kind of explains why they've not been seen interacting very much. He's had his fill of her.
And thus, Zenigata's immediately onto Oscar's game the second his time is taken off of Lupin's trail to deal with the fake Fujiko's crime spree, culminating in Oscar dressing up as Fujiko to fake a chase, only for his deception to immediately break and be exposed to one of the other Interpol officers.
Fujiko Mine isn't wanted for murder yet. That could change everything.
Or he could live long enough for him to tell someone it was you. Or if you're using a law enforcement issued weapon, they'd immediately know it was you the second they dug the bullet out of his body. The game's over, dude! You lost! The bums lose! The bums always lose!
Hell, even Amida, who's involved due to the bad frame job he's done, completely has his number on why he hates Fujiko so much, when it is Lupin that Zenigata spends his time chasing after.
Inspector Zenigata to interrogate you the same way he did Fujiko Mine. The sharp, sweet intimacy of that room. The deep, penetrating questions.
No!
And thus, Almeida offers him the carrot, as Almeida has perfected the means to mind control people. And in person enslaved to their own fanatic infatuation, they are easy to manipulate.
And that's why it is always important to check your associates for yandere tendencies. Yanderes! It's the disease, not the cure.
Thus, the Owlman gives him his final plan to ensure Fujiko's notoriety as a capital criminal, blowing a bridge to steal a dress from a royal in a parade procession, only for Lupin's team to entirely thwart their efforts, Goemon cutting trees to block the parade, as Lupin works to disarm the bomb they've planted, which ends up being in the same place Zenigata and Oscar met. The day Zenigata was at his lowest in a city surrounded by corruption, even in his own departments.
From that little brat that day. He taught me there's one thing you can never let go of, no matter how dirty your hands are. Superior. I lost all chance of promotion, but I don't regret it. A little thing, but it's all that a man's really got. You let it go. I believe in people who do what it takes to protect their pride.
And this breaks Oscar, as he realizes all the mistakes he's made mattered not to achieving what he really wanted, deciding to take the bomb out himself.
And all along, belief is all that matters. It's what I really want to protect.
This brings us to the two-part series finale, beginning with Zenigata arresting Fujiko for the crimes Oscar committed, but held off from taking her in because of a recent string of kidnappings which has caught her attention, all of which featuring a girl being abducted from a home where owl paraphernalia was spotted, a call sign of Imelda and his court of owls. Thus it brings the group together to confront Imelda over these kidnappings in his own twisted amusement park.
Okay, mental note. Never enter a building with my name written on it like that.
The innards of the house do nothing but bring back the memories she's done her best to suppress. The entire place, just one big trip down memory lane, exposing all she wanted to lose, and all the other test subjects that were there alongside her, with her the only survivor.
This is your tale and no one else's.
Which thus brings us to Lupin's role and decision in this once all the pieces have been put together. Everything that's happened is a story Amida has interfered with to write himself. All for their own ends.
You know what I'm after? Simple. Love.
I wanted just to escape. Find my defiled, cursed self. For good. I earned myself in finery. Eventually, I locked it all away. Safe inside a treasure chest.
Yeah. These of our days of love. But I couldn't allow that. So I created.
It's never a more twisted goal when that is the response to such a question.
And damn it, if nothing else, he's going to steal back her story for her. Unfortunately, Almeida's got a few more pawns in store. Having recovered Oscar as he drifted in the river after disposing of the bomb, and used him as one of several living dolls to attempt to copy Fujiko. Goemon among them for that purpose, but not farther along than being put in drag, with him cutting the power to the Twisted Park, but Oscar himself is a bit too far gone, all while Fujiko is left alone to confront the man who victimized her.
On my lap. If you don't do as I say, I'll have to punish you again. I'll burn you to ashes, Fujiko.
Fujiko, can you hear me?
Or at least, so she thinks. Lupin encouraging her and trying to help her break her long conditioning again, with the strength she's held within herself all this time to live and act as she wanted.
Somebody here needs to die now, but it isn't me. It's over. I'm ending my nightmare here and now.
However, it's another trick. The Imelda there, another fake. The man spreading his dust all throughout the facility to drown them all in hallucinations.
Gotcha, you feathered bastard!
You must be mistaken. The only feathered bastard I see around here is you.
Speak for yourself, bird-face!
Because, of course, there had to be one gun versus sword standoff between those two in this. It's kind of obligatory.
But Fujiko and Lupin make it inside Imelda's secret sanctum, the only place he doesn't have cameras overwatching everything, only to find a frail woman connected to computers on the inside. This has all actually been her doing. For as Lupin explains, having connected the pieces together, Almeida's experiments happened. Fujiko was one of their victims, but the drugs to introduce mind control were meant to falsify her memories. Many of which, of her being tortured, Fujiko cut open, having a brand placed on her foot, they're not her own, but this girl's. Aisha Kaiser, the real daughter of the bold scientist from before that attempted to introduce himself as Fujiko's dad.
Wait, you're telling me that what we thought we'd learned about Fujiko in this series wasn't even her real backstory? Well, to be fair, I don't like the multiple origin stories trying to pin down Lupin's actual backstory, since I feel that's unneeded for the character to function in his role, so I shouldn't fault this series for trying to do the same your past doesn't matter ending to everything. But when you've invested time into experiencing a series just to learn all the answers, and it ends in a cop-out of none of it mattered to begin with, you're going to feel a sense of betrayal nonetheless. Free tip. Never end a story you make, be it a novel, a comic, a movie, or a TV series, with an implication that nothing in your story ever mattered. It pisses off and insults the audience something fierce to learn the time they have invested in your work just ended up wasted on something that didn't give a damn about following through in the first place. It is especially infuriating in anything that involves time travel, as the reset button frequently used in those tales is just a cop-out excuse to avoid a bad group of protagonists from being held responsible for the consequences of their actions.
Regardless, what has gotten confused in all of this is actually the dividing line between Fujiko herself and Aisha. The chemical spill we've explored before led to a small number of the test subject girls surviving, with Almeida trying from all of this to create his own perfect, pampered daughter, with which to do everything he asked and succeed him. The experimentation crippled Aisha, but by the point Imelda died years before this, she'd become too indoctrinated to his desires to obtain the perfect little girl that the one most destroyed by them continued on in his stead, using the owls as her means of surveillance, all wired back to this machine. The false copy dolls Zenegat and the others found downstairs, the latest of them trying to make copies of the perfect girl, one matching the only perceived success of that project, Fujiko herself, originally a maid of Aisha's in the castle. Because she survived the process, when every other girl she implanted with her memories went insane the second they were released in her own wish to see what she might have been able to do had she not been crippled. Fujiko is not the victim of Ameda, not directly. She's the victim of Aisha wanting to discover what she could have been had Aisha been able to become Imelda's perfect girl, and then thrown it all away. Aisha has lived vicariously through watching Fujiko live the life she'd wanted for herself had she had the chance. But even that is a self-made lie, as Fujiko over time suppressed all the false memories to be her, and began to hate Fujiko, beginning the experiments again in order to replace her. Because when she suppressed the memories, the truth returned, and the true life she's lived ever since was always who she was. A thief after her next big score.
And casual sex were my scene long before I even met you. Living your hypothetical life. Shame I'd screwed up past you try to give me. I am still myself. That's Fujiko Mine.
We hope you enjoyed No Moral Theater, ladies and gentlemen. No deep, dark revelations here, just one long mind screw plot.
So, of course, Aisha's gotta kill her, Oscar going even more nuts and setting the place on fire. Lupin revealing that why the main owl man, actually Aisha's mother, wanted Fujiko dead was simply so the story and Aisha's obsession would end, as they're both near the end of their lives.
Back and watched while your daughter had her life stolen from her. You don't deserve her life up beyond any recognition. You deserve to be her mother.
As a last act before her end, Lupin and Fujiko give Aisha one final day in the world, allowed to see it for the first time with her own eyes away from her abusers and those that enabled them. Freedom, if only in brief, before the end. Thus, this prequel series wraps itself up where it began. Fujiko and Lupin driving one after the other. The chase of his ultimate prize, always in the distance, speeding out of sight.
The Woman Called Fujiko Mine is really good and well plotted, though admittedly not quite to my personal taste. Let me explain.
I am not particularly fond of what is known as the mind screw plot, or at least this type of mind screw plot, where some force messes with someone's head and twists their perception of things, so we don't know and can't trust what is real and true, and what isn't and just a fabrication, as then it ends up in turn twisting what we can actually believe actually happens. We don't know what actually counts as having happened, thus how can we consider the experience and exploration presented as valid if there is some forgery behind it all? Often when one occurs, it ends up in someone being depicted, well, off to how you expect them to be, even though they are some of the rawest forms of character presentation. That part I always enjoy about such tales, as the exploration and dynamics of characters I seek out to stay intrigued and interested by the media I enjoy. But stick someone into a story where the details become muddled and abstract, where you don't know what you can believe anymore, and well, what is the audience supposed to take out of it at the end? That's why I don't care for those plots very often. If they do not appropriately tie themselves to the integrating route of getting to explore the psyches of the involved through the abstract world the hallucination or twisted perception takes us through, then what is supposed to be grounding us to this exploration? It's like interpretations of Picasso paintings. Everyone gets something different out of abstract art than may have been intended to be shown by the artist. Such narratives are damn effective when they're pulled off right, but, well, I've seen a lot of bad ones over my time, as a lot of science fiction series like to do that type of mind screw plot.
And the Fujiko miniseries is certainly not a bad one, but with recapping and analyzing one, well, it gets a lot harder to do both. I feel I'm left with more recap than analysis with this one, as it's either straightforward tales in the Lupin-esque heists and adventures, just with Fujiko as the focus character, or it's moments of abstract artistry I don't feel I'm qualified to deconstruct.
And also something I don't particularly care for is just the raw sexuality and nudity. I'm not knocking those who actually do like that stuff, as there is a place for that and meaning for why it is here, but it just was a bit overbearing for my taste. When I want fan service like that, well, I seek out fan service like that. A lot of it admittedly was well done and tasteful, either a hearkening to Fujiko's own use of her body and charms as a weapon, or used as a metaphorical open display of others' twisted perversions and objectification of women as their playthings that is just wrong to begin with. So it wasn't here with intention to titillate, but present more aspects of character through the visual medium. But sometimes it was just overbearingly in your face with how raw it was. To the point that over time, instead of shocking, attention-grabbing, or mature, it just became window dressing.
And I've ended up having that same issue with a few other series that have used such, case in point being the Garo franchise. My eyes just beginning to gloss over it without much note, despite, isn't there supposed to be a thrill to it? Crap, has reviewing stuff with nudity or disturbing sexual content ruined my appreciation for boobs?
Regardless of this, I really do feel the series nails the characters in a way the prior origin stories I've discussed don't fully manage to match. With the origin story for them, I'm probably the most accepting of, as it doesn't screw with who they are and try to tie it into some bigger event to then start them on being themselves, but present them as who they've always been, a crystallization of their consistent characterization, just with them encountering one another for the first time, and Fujiko being an inciting factor for why those dynamics would begin and continue as they have.
Well, except for Zenigata being on Lupin's case, but that is a story for another day. In the interim, though, I'm Shinta, and I'll see you all next time.